Hey everyone, what's going on? So a couple weeks ago, I released a video taking a look at every new MMO scheduled to come out in 2024. Now on that video, I had a few comments where people were asking why I neglected to include the Quinfall. And that's a really good question. If you're unfamiliar, the Quinfall is an upcoming fantasy medieval inspired MMO being developed by Valrek Technology Inc. Beyond the standard content and feature offerings seen in most MMOs, Quinfall boasts a few interesting claims. They say to have built the world's largest MMO map with a total play area of 2,016 square kilometers, which frankly is a bit crazy. To put this in perspective, that is roughly 54 times the size of Skyrim, which is 37 square kilometers. It's about 10 times the size of World of Warcraft, which was 207 square kilometers. It's also about 5 times the size of Lord of the Rings Online, Black Desert Online, and Elder Scrolls Online, which are all roughly 400 kilometers squared, and it's about twice the size of the original Guild Wars, which was 1,000 square kilometers. So yeah, if it's true that the Quinfall is in fact 216,000 square kilometers, yes, that would be one of the biggest MMOs we've ever played. Now they say that the world is going to consist of 5 regions, each with their own climate and major cities. There's a day-night cycle and changing weather. Both the weather and seasons will directly impact the world, like summer and winter can affect the population of plants and animals, or there'll be floods and droughts that can change the size of bodies of water. There's going to be community-driven features like trade routes with caravans. You can visit player shops and taverns. There's going to be multiplayer board, dice, and other mini games. They've got this focus on exploration and discovery, like you'll pick up hints and clues by solving puzzles or deciphering codes, and you'll use those to find the entrances to hidden areas, secret passages, and even dungeons. There's going to be dozens of professions with various forms of gathering, crafting, and farming. You can even hire NPCs or other players to work for you. And then beyond the medieval fantasy setting, they've also shown some steampunk elements with things like zeppelins, trains, and massive mechanical mechs. Their survival game style gathering and base building. You see players placing down individual blueprint pieces for a building. There's an ocean as well that's said to be as big as the open world. You can build ships and sail to new islands, fight giant enemies, as well as the elements dealing with winds and huge waves. You'll also encounter other players and pirate factions while at sea. The game will be utilizing an action combat system with basic and heavy attacks, dodges, blocks, and various spells and abilities. There will be PvE activities from fighting basic enemies to huge bosses. We've seen sandworms, krakens, and dragons. And there's open world PvP as well, with various types of medieval themed combat with like ship battles, island skirmishes, and castle sieges. So those are the main highlights and talking points for the Quinfall. And yeah, there's some pretty interesting stuff here. It's an interesting list of bullet points and features. So the question remains though, why didn't I include this game on my list of the upcoming MMOs of 2024? Well, frankly, it didn't even cross my mind. Quinfall had simply fallen off my radar. Mainly, this was due to the fact that I remember first hearing about the game in 2022 with that official reveal trailer, and at that time, the game was said to be in alpha and had only been in development for 1 year. So naturally, I thought for sure it was going to be another one of those MMOs we were learning about super early and it wouldn't release for another 5+ years or more. But it turns out, I was wrong. The Quinfall is actually coming out later this month with a scheduled release date of January 30th, 2024. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Wait a second, Force. I thought you just said the game started development in 2021. And I did, that's correct. According to the developer's website, the Quinfall began production in January 2021. Doing a little bit of quick napkin math here, and yep, that pretty much confirms. That was a mere 3 years ago. So the next question you might have, is 3 years enough time to make an MMO? To which my baseline default answer would be 100%. Absolutely not. No way, at least not historically true. Most of the MMOs you probably know and have played over the years have had an average development time of at least 5 years prior to releasing. World of Warcraft was in development for 5 years before it came out. Star Wars: The Old Republic had a 6-year development cycle. Guild Wars 2 also took 6 years to develop, and the Elder Scrolls Online was in development for 7 years before it came out, and those are just a few examples of some well-known MMOs made made by mostly AAA studios with plenty of funding and large development teams, about as well equipped as you could expect to make a game of this scale. Took on average 5 to 7 years. I think maybe with the exception of Guild Wars 2, as I'm just not certain how big or well-funded ArenaNet was at the time that game was in production. Even if they were small and not funded, yeah, it took them 6 years to make the game. So yes, as a baseline, my response would be, I would say 3 years is not a lot of time to make an MMO. It's most certainly probably not enough time to make, quote, the biggest MMORPG in the world ever, or whatever Quinfall is calling themselves. Although, as we also know, size has no bearing on quality. That's been proven out many, many times over the years. You could have an absolutely massive game and just nothing to do in it. Like maybe you've got billions of planets with nothing on them, for example. But you know what? I won't say it's impossible. I would say that if you have a large enough team, if you have enough funding, and if you have a reasonable scope for your game, yeah, sure, maybe you could make a decent MMO in 3 years. But at the same time, I would state that the odds are stacked against you because yes, historically, every big MMO that we know of to date took much longer, almost twice as much time to actually make before releasing. So then the next question is, what do we know about the studio who's making this game, the people making the Quinfall? Well, we actually know a fair bit. So the Quinfall is being developed by Varec Technology Inc. Now, according to the About Us section of their website, they were founded in January 2021 and aim to become one of the pioneers of the industry with advanced technologies and AI systems, beginning with the release of, quote, the biggest MMORPG universe in the world to the global audience with our new game, Quinfall. Now, that is the summary of how the studio describes themselves, their vision and goals. Pretty standard stuff. You'll see this on just about every About Us section from any developer. Things get a bit more confusing though when you scroll down the page to the What is Quinfall section. Here is verbatim how they describe the game. Just strap in for this one. Quinfall's fateful doors have been opened again. Of this land where wars and chaos live forever, the life that would determine its destiny once again challenged time. His destiny is a cursed crown. It is to deliver the lands in which chaos reigned to the sharp sword of justice. In this process, against he was ready to destroy anyone who came out, but was the sword of justice really perfect? This journey that will determine the fate of Middle Earth, this fact that will be rewritten with right and wrong, are you ready to start over? Your choices will determine the course of the story. Choose what you will rule. Pretty clear that they didn't get around to asking a single native English speaker to proofread this because frankly, it's incoherent, a bit of a jumbled mess, and makes no sense really whatsoever. I read this over in my head about 10 times in a row, trying to piece together some idea of what they were trying to convey. Couldn't come up with anything. In fact, the more I read it, the more confusing it got every single time. It almost feels like something that was AI generated. Like this description of the game seems like it was just put in an AI thing and spit out the other side, but I'm not going to put a stake in that claim. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt and just chalk it up to like a bad Google translation or something, as the company is Turkish, which we'll cover here in the next bit. So looking a little further down the page, we see this timeline highlighting the developer's history. 2022 is when they actually changed names from previously being known as Arena Game Studio to the now used Varec Technology. Now, this was later described in interviews done by the developer that this name change was meant to highlight their focus of using tech and AI and not just being a game developer. Not exactly what you want to hear from people making a game that you might be interested in playing, but there you go. That was the motivation behind the name change. The year prior, in 2021, we see additional confirmation that this is when they began development on the Quinfall. But then also in 2021, we noticed that they had canceled the production of another game known as Kyra Online. And here's where things actually get interesting. This throws a wrench in pretty much everything else I was thinking about this game up until this point and the studio. So Kyra Online began development in 2019. This was an MMORPG based on Turkish mythology. I was actually able to find quite a fair few videos of the game, and while it certainly looks dated, almost like it released 20 years ago, it also seems to have been an actual, real, functional game. Yes, it is very low budget looking, almost like it came out in the 90s or something, like a 90s MMO, and it's not something that I could see myself playing in the year 2024, but I also wouldn't say it looks terrible, just old and low budget. I've seen way worse games. I'll put it that much. Like, I look at this and it almost feels like what I remember in my head Asheron's Call having looked like when I played that back in 1999. I know it looked way worse, but you know, when you think about what your vision of a game when you played it many years ago, that's the vibe that I get from this. This really feels like I'm looking at a late 90s, early 2000s MMO, a pre-WoW MMO, basically. This looks like a pre-WoW MMO that could have existed in that time frame. And it seems fine. It seems to run fine. We're seeing like a lot of like AoE grinding. There's some examples of large-scale PvP. Again, I know it looks super low budget. I know it looks old. I know it looks it doesn't look particularly modern day great, but it's still clearly a functioning game, right? Like, it was running, it was functioning, people were playing it. I think what's the most impressive, though, is that Kyra Online began development by a single dude. This was a one-man project, and then over the course of 2019, more people were added to the team. Then, in 2020, after having 1 year in production, Kyra Online entered closed beta, and this is what released. That's kind of crazy to me, that they worked on an MMO for a year, starting with one person, built the team. Over the course of the year, they made this MMO. I know a lot of you probably think it looks like crap, but it's actually impressive to me that they made this in a year and released it into beta. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying this is the best looking game ever at all, but I'm just saying it's actually somewhat impressive to me. Now, this was a very small scale beta, which is probably why you've never heard of it before, because the game was only available in Turkish and appears to not have been played much, if at all, outside of that region. But when I looked online, what little discussion I could find surrounding Kyra Online actually seemed fairly positive. Seems like the people who played this actually thought it was decent. In fact, as we now know, in the following years, using Kyra Online almost like a proof of concept for their tech and their work on live service MMO servers and networking, they were then able to obtain the funding from Turkish investors to start development on the Quinfall. Now, again, there is actually hours worth of Kyra Online gameplay that you can go watch for yourself on YouTube. Just do a quick search. The game even had its own Twitch directory at one point, although unfortunately it appears no VODs have been stored there. But yes, I have to reiterate this. I know it looks super low budget, it was, but I am still pretty impressed with what they turned out after only a year in development. From what I read, they never charged for anything either. Like, if you're thinking, Force, was this a bait and switch? It doesn't appear to have been that either. There were no founders packages or in-game stores, as far as I can tell. They just held various public beta tests throughout 2020 to a predominantly or entirely Turkish audience, but ultimately decided to cancel that game and focus on their efforts on the Quinfall, which is releasing to a global audience. So they're looking to appeal to a larger scale. I want to add here as well, when it comes to like the studio's current size, it's no longer one person or just a handful of people like it was for Kyra Online. Their website links to the official LinkedIn page, where it states that the company is made up of somewhere between 50 and 200 people. Doing a little further digging, I found a few articles and interviews where they actually specified the exact number of people currently working on the Quinfall is 56. Now, this was like in the middle of 2023 where that information was pulled from, so it's quite possible they have scaled up in the months since then. But just as a quick recap, so the Quinfall developer Varek Technology used to be called Arena Game Studios. Under that name, their first official project, Kyra Online, was this MMO that was in development from 2019 to 2021. And yeah, while it looked dated and low budget, it does appear to have been a real functional game that people played and evidently enjoyed. But then in 2021, they got funding based off of Kyra Online as proof of concept and began development for the Quinfall, which now has been in production for coming up on 3 years. And with all of that said, like I mentioned, this kind of threw a wrench in what I was thinking and kind of my general sentiment towards the Quinfall. Because when I first looked at the Quinfall, watching the gameplay and knowing the facts just around that game, dubious is the word to best describe what I felt about the project. I'm a bit torn right now for that reason. Like, there's some huge red flags when it comes to this MMO. 3 years, like I've said, is a very short time to develop a game of this scale, about half the time of what most large studios require to make an MMO. Similarly, 56 people is a very small development team size to produce an MMO. And technically, yeah, the developer hasn't released a game yet. This would be their first, and maybe this could just be one of those investor bait and switch scams. We've seen some of those fairly recently, if you recall, just the other month with the game known as The Day Before, the no longer existent FN-tastic. My honest expectations right now, when Quinfall launches later this month, I expect it's going to be very large, as they say. I've got no reason to deny their claim that the map is just over 2,000 square kilometers, but I also suspect it'll be very likely a majority of that map will be empty, given that time span span of 3 years and a development team of 56 people. Not a lot of time, not a lot of devs to make an MMO 10 times the size of World of Warcraft and actually fill that with interesting content. It'll probably be mostly procedural, mostly empty landscapes, also further enforced by the devs' stated focus on using AI for development. We got a bunch of heavily procedurally generated landscape that they've stretched out to a large square footage, right? And I want to add as well, I'm not delusional here, because yes, I agree, looking at the gameplay, doesn't look particularly great for what they've shown of Quinfall. I would say the combat in particular seems not satisfying. I can feel the floatiness and lack of impact just from watching this footage. Many animations are quite janky if they're present at all. We're seeing a lot of stiff movement here, almost as if everyone's got like a bad back or something. And initially, yeah, I didn't include the Quinfall on my upcoming MMOs of 2024 video because I thought there was no way in heck that the game was releasing, given that I knew it had only been in production for 3 years. I just put it on a similar timeline to all those other indie MMOs that we've seen come and go this past decade. And looking further into the game and watching all the footage they've released, that didn't leave me terribly hopeful either. Some of the visuals are nice, sure, but most of the rest of everything else looks rough. Character models look rough. Animations, like I said, look really stiff and floaty. Environmental details are quite lacking, and the combat, it looks bad. I'll just say it, the combat looks bad from what they've shown. But then, after learning about and seeing footage of Kyra Online, it makes me think twice. It does. If they can make that game in 1 year, open it up into beta, and have this be the result of that, and have people playing it and apparently enjoying it, then I don't know. Maybe 3 years has been enough time for Quinfall. I just hope that the combat that they've shown us is something that is getting severely worked on, because it just looked really bad from what we've seen. If anything, I would actually say that ideally they've taken a lot from Kyra and put it into Quinfall, and then that can make up for this tight turnaround time of 3 years. In fact, I'm pretty sure, like watching a lot of footage of both of those games, I'm pretty sure I've seen very many similar looking spells, attack animations, and abilities between the two games. Nearly identical. I swear, watching a bunch of that Kyra Online how do you pronounce that? Watching a bunch of the footage of their last MMO, I'm like, those spells look like the spells that I've seen in the Quinfall stuff. So that would be like the silver lining, if anything. Like what they've worked on, what they started working on for Kyra Online wasn't totally scrapped when they moved into Quinfall. And I don't know, maybe that just means we get a good MMO. That's all we're hoping for, right? We'll be finding out very, very soon, in just a few weeks, actually. As mentioned, the Quinfall is set to enter Steam Early Access on January 30th. I am still not expecting a lot, because even though learning about their past game and seeing their past game doesn't change the fact that Quinfall itself, from what they've shown, doesn't look terribly good. Who knows? We will see very soon. As usual, I'm keeping my expectations low on this one, but I'm hoping for the best. And you know what? I love being surprised. I hope Quinfall surprises me in a good way. We'll find out soon. But that does it for today. Thank you as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed the vid. See you guys next time, right? Take it easy.